Hi and welcome to this channel. If you're new here, I'm Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm, and in that process I try to inspire you to do the same. In this video I'm going to do my first wrap-up of the year. I really enjoy these wrap-ups just because it makes me learn a lot more and remember what I've read, so that's a very positive thing about these videos. I'm currently reading Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset, and I'm halfway through. I will finish it in February and it will be a joyous occasion. The reason I'm telling you this is that this month I read only smaller books just because I needed to get ahead of my reading schedule, and I also needed something to read in between the books in the book. So Kristin Lavransdatter is 3 books, so I could read one small before and one in between each of the books in the book. So to sum this up, when you watch my February wrap-up, I will be a very happy person. For those who do not know, this shelf behind me is my shelf for the books I've read, so I try to have this shelf as a motivating factor in my reading life. And for now, I also have this shelf, which is for books that I'm currently reading or have read the past month. So these are the books that I've read for January, and this way I can sort of see how much of my shelf is going to be filled up with books when I made my wrap-up video, as I do today. You might say that this is my long-term aspiration and this is my short-term motivation. And it really works. I think we'll just get started. I started the year by reading a short classic, which at the time I thought was a good idea, but I ended up making a review of it just because it frustrated me so much. And that was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, regarded as the world's first sci-fi novel. The story is well known. Frankenstein is a doctor and he creates a monster. The monster becomes lonely because no one wants to hang around a monster. And the monster says that he will destroy Frankenstein's life if he does not make another monster so he can have a friend or girlfriend or sibling or whatever it becomes. And the rest of the story is just those two complaining about each other and destroying each other without actually trying to resolve their conflict in any way. I know many people love this book. I just couldn't take it. And I mentioned in my review that the translation might be a part of it because the language was so bizarre in many ways, pretentious and unbelievably formal. It made it all quite laughable, for me at least, while reading it. I couldn't take this book seriously for 1 second. The thing that frustrated me the most is that the monster, when he was created, he did not have any mental capacity to perform tasks, but suddenly he had traveled for weeks without any map or knowing where he was going, but he hit Frankenstein's family, and then he just learned all their feelings and thoughts until he was almost like a philosopher, because he reflected so much on his own situation, which just didn't make any sense. And the last thing I'm going to talk about today is the frustration around their complaining, because they're both just complaining through the whole story without actually doing anything about the situation. So they're both intellectuals after a while, but they can't really resolve their conflict, and that annoyed me a lot. And of course, I felt pity for the monster because he had no friends and he realized that everyone around him didn't like him. I don't think I'll talk more about this book this time. If you want to hear all my thoughts, you can watch my review. But let's just say I started 2022 with a terrible book, for me at least. Luckily, Frankenstein did not break me, and I started reading last year's most sold author, and that's Richard Osman and the Thursday Murder Club. The Thursday Murder Club is a club of old people in a retirement village in England, and they get together and solve crime puzzles from the past. And the group contains 4 people that are hard to forget and very lovable, all of them, but also very different, which makes the book quite funny at times. And they're sort of just entangled in this drama happening around them at one point, which is the story. But the story also drags in a lot from the past of the characters. I don't think I'll talk a lot more about the plot, just because it's a mystery novel and I want the mystery to be contained. I'll start off by talking a little bit about the retirement village, because this is a village for people that certainly has a good health. They're all in their late 70s or early 80s, and I suspect that they have quite a lot of money, many of them, because this place sounds like a good place to grow old. And they are lucky to be in the health status that they are in, both mentally and physically. I thought about this for quite some time because they are very healthy and living life, but the reality is that not everyone in their age group are as lucky as them, and the book reflects on them being in a retirement village, growing old, looking back at the past, and talking about the realities of growing old, but no one of them really experiences the realities of growing old, you might say. Which I didn't find weird or not fit in with the rest of the story, it just made me think about that a lot while reading it. Even though I really liked the way it was written and what they thought about the past and the future for themselves. I would call this book feel good, and I've actually laughed out loud more while reading this book than any other book I've read, and that's a huge surprise. I wasn't expecting that at all. I think one of the things that makes this book so funny is that they're very different, the four people. They've all lived their life and they're not going to change now, and so they are themselves completely in every situation, which I think is a great thing about this book. Also, there's quite a lot of dark humor in the book, which I also enjoy. At some points in the book, it was almost like reading a farce comedy because there was so many things happening, so many complications, and they managed to balance this quite nicely, so it never became too much, I would say. All in all, a very good read, and I'm going to read the sequel at some point. The next book is actually the first book where I've watched the movie before and then read the book, so that's the first, and that's Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Coraline is the girl depicted here, and she lives in a big house with many doors. One of the doors only leads to a brick wall, but one day the brick wall is gone and she passes through the door. She then goes into a parallel universe where the house is the same as before, but there's another family there with buttons for eyes. She stays there for a while and then goes back through the door and comes back to her own place, but when she comes back to her own place, the family is gone. Then she goes through the door again and she realizes that the family is trapped by the family she is now visiting. The rest of the story is about Coraline and how she is going to save her family and bring the family home again. I'll start off by saying that I can't remember anything from the movie, just that I didn't enjoy the movie, and I watched it when it came out, so that's many years ago. This book I really enjoyed. I have to say this is the first Neil Gaiman book that I read in Norwegian, just because I bought this secondhand, and it's usually not that many English books in the secondhand stores. And I kind of realized that I'm beginning to become a snob because I really missed reading Neil Gaiman in English, and I think that would be a better experience, even though I really enjoyed the book. So I feel like a snob, and it's a mix between pleasure and pain, you might say. Is that something I want to become? I don't know, but it felt good that I could say to myself that, oh, this would be so much better in English. But I still very much enjoyed it, and I got the sort of same chilling vibe that I got when I read Shirley Jackson last year, and that's a good thing. And I even liked this story a lot more than the Shirley Jackson book. So happy I read it finally, after having it in my shelf for a long time. But I might read it in English at some point, because there were so many times during my read that I just thought, what would Neil Gaiman have written here? I should also say that this was my first read with illustrations, which I really enjoyed, of course. The last book I managed to finish this month was Things My Son Needs to Know About the World by Fredrik Backman. This is a book I knew I would love just because I have two sons, so this would be twice as pleasurable to read about. And this book was actually the first book that made me cry in public. So I started reading this book while on the train, and during the first 2 pages I cried. One of the first things I did when I finished the book was going on Goodreads and reading about other people's experiences with the book. Of course, since I loved it, I was wondering about what people disliked about it, and many people said that they were expecting to learn something. I did not expect to learn anything from this book before I started reading it, because it's only the author's thoughts in a funny way about being a parent. And many people talked about the chapter about IKEA, where he talks about what to do and what to expect at IKEA. And I still think that Fredrik Backman managed to make this funny, and I don't think it's, of course, not new thoughts he brings to the table, but I enjoyed it anyway. Of course, very highly relatable stuff, because every parent has gone through many of these things that he himself talks about. But I think the most valuable thing about this book is where the author talks about his mistakes and how to treat people and what to say and not to say and all that. I just thought it was very funny and heartwarming. Don't read this book if you're expecting to learn a lot about how to behave around children or how to raise kids, but read it if you want to feel that everyone else also feels the same things as you. Would I recommend this book for non-parents? I have no idea. I thought this was a funny read, but I think that because I have kids, this book is much more valuable to me than it would have been if I read it many years ago. So inconclusive, but I will read this book again and I really loved it, and I will get my other dad friends to read it. So that was it. If you have recommendations for me or comments to this video, please comment below in the comment section where I'll be ready to type back. And thank you for watching. I'm really looking forward to the stack being bigger next time, with Kristin Lavransdatter included. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!